The three measures that we've talked about yesterday combined should reduce the peak by between 50 and 70% and should extend it out by 3, 4, 5 weeks possibly. So that would make a big difference. And then it depends.
Enough of a difference?
Well, it depends on the total percentage of the population that get infected and how many of those are asymptomatic. And you can see one thing's for sure is if you get a big peak over a short period of time, then that swamps any healthcare system in the world. And that's what we're trying to avoid. I think a very good job was done in terms of case identification and testing in terms of the containment phase. And we are actually behind where other people are on the curve because of quite intensive efforts that were done there. We've done something like 30,000 tests in the UK, of which 590 have been positive. That's a very large number of tests that have been done compared to some other countries. And Public Health England have ramped up so they can do over 2,000 a day. Now, going forward, having asked everybody to take this quite strong measure of saying, even with mild symptoms, you stay at home for a week. That's a lot of people who will be at home for a week. That's a big intervention that will have quite a big effect. You can't and shouldn't test all of those people. Doesn't make any sense. You can't have the capacity. You need to reserve those tests for people going to hospital, for people who might be in particular roles where you need to make sure they are indeed negative, and for making sure we've got a really good handle on the numbers across the country in intensive care, with pneumonias and in the community. So that's where testing is going to be used.
You've said you want to flatten the curve to
Yeah.
below hospital capacity. Is it worth warning people that if they don't take these measures seriously, particularly staying at home at the moment, they do risk that curve going above our hospital capacity?
That is exactly why we're so focused on trying to get these measures in. We need to take them seriously. People do need to do this, and you might need to do it more than once. Because at the moment, your cough and temperature may not be coronavirus, probably isn't. In a few weeks' time, it may be. What we know is that people can become infectious just around the time that they show symptoms and a couple of days afterwards, at the peak time for being infectious. We think asymptomatic people can be infectious. We're not really sure how infectious they are yet. The idea behind the measures we're taking is to try to slow and reduce transmission. You can't suppress this thing to zero. You can't, and you shouldn't. And the reason you shouldn't is that when you suppress a disease like this to zero, or very close to that, it just pops back up again. And so you end up with a second peak at a time when actually you're even less able to cope with it in terms of NHS and other pressures and so on. So
do you think other countries are risking that with the stricter
there is
measures?
a possibility. I think people are worried about that, and I know scientists in China are worried that might happen there. It is what you'd expect from other epidemics. It doesn't mean it's going to happen this time, but it's certainly something that people think is a real possibility.